Well, good evening. My name is Michael Hugh, and I'm very happy to have Brian Gardner with me today, interviewing as a candidate for a general manager position. And Brian, thanks for being here.
I appreciate the opportunity, Michael.
All right. Well, let's just jump right in. What do you think prepares you most, and why is it that you'd like to be a GM in this league?
Well, the things that I think prepare me the most, I've been in the league 30 years. I've been blessed to have been with 4 different organizations. One of those organizations twice in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Mm-hmm. And during that course of time, I have been both on the college and pro side of personnel. I've had an opportunity to observe the inner workings of these organizations and to be an integral part of them. The opportunity to observe how these organizations function, both in season, off season, how these organizations function in terms of the draft, in terms of free agency, in terms of inter season with the players. I've done a lot of the things that I've been advised to do to prepare myself. I've been in a leadership capacity for the past 15 seasons as a pro personnel director, both in Houston and in Tennessee. So I've had the opportunity to manage a department, to manage budgets, to manage people. Also, from a professional preparation standpoint, I have participated in the Stanford Management, Business Management School, all of the symposiums that the league has sponsored to prepare myself and to educate myself. I've done a lot of different things in terms of researching and studying leadership. But most importantly, I've tried to get around good people that have been in these positions before, and try to glean from them what they did to prepare, what the qualifications and the expectations for the positions are. And I've tried to prepare myself as much as I could without actually being in that seat myself, in order to be prepared to take on that challenge.
Well, I know the season ended a little abruptly and maybe a little unexpectedly in the playoffs, but tell me about your role with the club today, what you're doing specifically, and who are some of the key influences that folks that's been with you at the organization.
Sure. Well, I came to the Titans in 2014, and I was hired under one general manager, and I was able to transition into our current general manager, John Robinson, still in the same role as director of pro personnel. In my role, I have a staff of about 6 scouts that I organize in terms of the different aspects of pro personnel that we're responsible for. During the season, which we're just coming off of, we have 2 primary responsibilities. The first being advanced scouting, which is going out and evaluating and scouting our upcoming opponents. The other is making sure that our club is prepared to replace any players that may become injured, that are not performing up to par, or in any way that we need to upgrade our roster. So I like to say we're the 911 people, because we're always on call, whether it's an injury, whether it's something off the field, no matter what it is, in connection with players. If there needs to be a move on the roster, generally the general manager will come to myself and my department, and it's our charge to be prepared in any way possible, be that a veteran free agent, be that a practice squad player, be that a trade, no matter what that situation is, we need to be prepared. And that's generally my charge, in addition to in season with preparing our coaches as best we can to break down the upcoming opponent and be prepared to play on Sundays. In the off season, we're typically preparing for free agency, which with the season ending just now, tomorrow we have a post season evaluation of our club so that we know exactly where we stand with our players who are whose contracts are expiring, and then to discuss what the landscape is of upcoming free agents and who might be a fit, and kind of initially go through a list that, you know, we'll prepare for our coaches so that we have a holistic approach to tackling free agency. We're always with the club, kind of like the coaches. So we're always involved, whether it's off season, whether it's OTAs, no matter when it is. If the coaches are around, then we're in that role of servicing the coaches in the organization.
Well, you've had a very broad experience, not just because you've been in the league for so long, but you've worked in pro side, you've worked in college, you've done the programs that the league has to educate you off the field with the academic programs at Stanford and other programs. And you've been around several organizations. But I'm curious, what do you think are the biggest challenges a general manager faces? And how do you think you're best suited to address those challenges?
Well, I think generally, unless you're in being promoted from within the organization, I think the first challenge that you're going to face is connecting with the new organization and getting the lay of the land and knowing exactly where you need to attack in terms of improvements. There's a reason why the job is open. That's important to know, especially from an ownership standpoint, is why they're looking for that replacement, whether it's performance-based, whether the person just moved on and decided to retire. No matter what that circumstance is, the job is open. So it's important to be able to ascertain that and be able to come in and fill in that role as quickly as possible, getting up to speed, connecting with ownership, and then being able to develop your message and your way of operating, your quote unquote culture, begin to infiltrate that into the organization as quickly as possible. I don't think that anyone who hasn't sat in that seat knows exactly, you know, what's going to be expected or have done it unless you've actually been there. So for me, it'll be important to surround myself with good people, a kind of diverse staff, one that has some people that have either sat in that seat or been close to that seat, as well as new ideas. I think also that every person that comes in and takes that role, it's like players. There's no perfect player. So every person is going to have an area that they're very strong in. They're also going to have areas that they need to improve and maybe get more support. And I'm definitely open to that because, you know, for me, it's important to make sure that I can have that support through the people that I bring in, through the people that are existing in the organization, and be able to fulfill the role to the best of my ability.
You talked about a lot of the places that you've been. Who are some of the people that have had influences on you that you think you would bring some of the learning and teachings from those folks into this position for yourself?
Well, and not to date myself, but I have, in my career, I've worked for 10 different general managers. And having had that type of experience with that number of different people, I understand that each individual is going to have a different way of operating. When I was in San Francisco, I had the privilege and opportunity of working with Bill Walsh for 3 years. And Bill was a football mastermind. One of the things that he brought to the organization when he came in, you know, he had immediately changed our scouting system. And part of it was his approach was that he wanted to make sure that we were as detailed as possible. So one of the things I learned from Bill is to leave no stone unturned.
Mm.
to make sure that you're as precise as you possibly can be, whether it's grading players, your grading scale in your processes. One of the other things that he always talked about was in acquiring players and scouting players is to focus on what the player can do, his strong points, and how he can help the organization. It's easy from just a scouting standpoint to identify the negative, and the guy can't. But he always talked about, let's find what the guys can do, and then from there we can determine, does the person fit into our culture and what we want to do as a football team, both on and off the field. So I would say Bill had a tremendous influence on me, but I tried to glean something from every single general manager that I've worked with,
Right.
Whether it's having worked with Rick Smith in Houston. And one of the things he always talked about was, when you make decisions, you always have to think about the next step. So if I do this, then what?
Right.
And work backward from your desired result and work backward to where you are, and then you can kind of cover your bases. So I learned that from Rich McKay. I learned about structuring a staff and being able to make sure that within that staff, in terms of your pay structure and promotions and those sort of things, how you deal with associates at every level, trying to make sure that you're fair, that each person feels like that they're being respected within the organization. So again, I've tried to glean as much as I can from everybody I've worked for.
Well, a big buzzword around is culture. And you mentioned it about coming into an organization. How do you assess culture, and how do you build winning culture in an organization from a GM's position?
Well, I think the first thing, when I think about culture, I always think about kind of the definition of it being kind of shared goals and attitudes and practices. So the thing that I have to do is coming in to establish cultures. First, you've got to hire the right people and make sure that those people are people that see not only football, but have the right type of temperament and approach. And you guys are coming in and all pulling together in the same direction. It's hard enough to win in this league when you have everybody pulling together. But if you have people with different agendas, that isn't going to work. So from my standpoint, it's hire the right people, allow those people to do their jobs, and then make sure that from an attitude standpoint that we're standing for the right things. For me, it's about being authentic, being myself, not trying to manage the ball club in a way that maybe my predecessor did or the way somebody else did, but within myself, because people will see through that immediately. In Tennessee, some of the things that we talk about is from a football standpoint is effort, mental toughness. We talk about just being finishers and putting the team first. So that approach coming into an organization is to let everybody know that the first thing we're talking about and that we're determined to do is to make sure that we're team first. Okay, all the decisions that we make are going to be for the betterment of the team, not the individual. And you have to get people to buy into that. Sometimes, like a player may have to sacrifice some stats, that may sacrifice bonus, playtime, or whatever to fill the role that's necessary. You may have someone on your staff that you may have to reassign. So, just always talking about and being consistent with that message of team first. That's, to me, that's the way you build that culture.
And with respect to players and selecting players, obviously there are grades you talked about, but is there a criteria, one or two, that stands out for you that kind of tips the scale for you to say, this is a guy that I want when you're evaluating players? Are there certain traits that are kind of like must-haves for you in the way you do your job?
Well, absolutely. I think the first thing that I like to look at is beyond the skill set, because the first thing you have to be able to do is you got to be able to play. I always say that, a Toyota may be a nice car, but if you put it on a racetrack with a Ferrari, it's going to get beat. So
Right.
it's a Ferrari league. So the player has to be able to play.
Yeah.
And of course, by position, there are individual traits that the player has to have. But in general, in terms of must-haves, is the player has to love football. Okay. And that's important. Sometimes I'll talk with my staff about players and backgrounds, and you have two segments of the player's background and character, his football character and then his personal character. A lot of times we're dealing with young men, so they may have made some mistakes along the way. I always look at it as if, hey, as long as we research the player and we discover that he's not a repeat offender in terms of character, then I think young people may make mistakes along the way, but as long as they've learned from them and they're prepared to move on, we can deal with the player.
Yeah.
If the football character is deficient, to me, those are red flags that when I look at players, I'm looking at football character. Does the player love football? Does the player, is he coachable? Does the player have the type of attitude like we talked about, the team first, that he understands when he has to sacrifice for the greater good of the team? Is he a worker? Is he going to bring people with him? And is he a leader? So for me, must-haves are, the guy has to have football character, and he has to have football intelligence, because it's hard to win with players that you have to constantly teach. One of the things we talk about in Tennessee is we want smart football players. And that may not always be the highest quote unquote test score, but the player has to understand situations and has to be able to think fast on his feet and react, because we're going to walk you through every possible situation, and then you have to be prepared, and you have to be able to retain that, whether we teach it in week 1 and come back to it in week 18. So football character and football intelligence are big for me.
Well, we've talked a lot about qualifications of players and scouts. And I'm curious, with respect to yourself, what do you think your peers would say about you? How would they describe you as an evaluator of talent, as someone who could be a general manager? What do you think your peers would say?
Well, I think my peers would say that I'm an organized, a detailed person. One of the things that I do with my staff is I like to have my calendars and all those things spelled out, basically a year in advance. It's up on my wall. If you walk in my office, you'll see the year calendar with all the dates and pertinent deals written out in advance. So they know that, they'll say that about me. They'll say that I'm passionate about the game, that I'm always talking ball. I think they'll say that, I'm a person that cares about them as individuals. I like to know what's going on with my staff, not in a prying type of way, but just so that I know that, hey, we're all in this together. When we talk about that whole team first thing, that trickles down to the individual. If things are good with you at home, they'll be good with you on the job. So I care about my people, and they'll say that I'm a guy that brings a level of leadership to the department, not only by example, but in the way that I conduct myself and in the way that I go through everything, that responsibilities, assignments in our department. So, and I think that, the other thing that they'll say, because anybody that's been around me will say this, is that I'm a Christian man, a man of integrity and honesty. And so I know that they'll talk about those values.
Good. And personally, tell me about your academic background, your family, the things you like to do, hobbies, how you spend your free time away from football, if there is such a thing.
Yeah, at this time, there's very little time away from football. I am a proud HBCU grad, Prairie View A&M University in Texas. Both of my parents were HBCU grads. My mother was a graduate from Prairie View A&M. My dad from Southern University. My wife is Southern University. So we got a long history of HBCU in our household. Was a communication major in college. I guess I still use some of that in this business. And I was a good student. Finished with was it 3.1 in college. Mm-hmm. I always knew that I wanted to be a part of the National Football League. I didn't quite make it as a player. I bounced around from the Arena Football League to the CFL, the World League of American Football. I call myself the ultimate free agent. I kind of, wherever I could get paid, I played.
Right.
But for me, I was always focused on trying to be as successful as I could. I knew I wanted to be around the game. I kind of stumbled into personnel. As I mentioned, I was a player in the Arena Football League, got injured, and one of my coaches recommended me for a job as an assistant coach with an expansion franchise here in New Orleans. Mm-hmm. My mentor was a former NFL head coach named Ed Kayat, and we took an expansion franchise from, we were the first 2 employees hired, and we ended up being a very competitive ball club. And so I learned from grassroots. When I broke into the league with the Buccaneers, I broke in as a part-time scout. During the time I was hired, there was kind of a hiring freeze. They offered me the opportunity to scout as many schools as I could for $50 a day and all expenses, and I took it.
Right.
So I was a young kid. I was just hungry,
right.
And I wanted to get in, and so I took the opportunity. I tried to make the best of it, and so I just feel like what I bring to the table is that of a person who's worked his way from the bottom end of pro football to the position that I'm in today. And so what I would bring to an organization is just that same type of grinder type mentality, that no job is too small or no job is too big to attack.
And what team were you on in the World League of American Football?
I was with the Barcelona Dragons.
Yes. Well, I was the GM. I was the GM of Birmingham, and that's where I first met you. So, our histories go back a little further. So,
that's right.
Yeah. Right. Well, look, we're going to wrap up. Was there anything else you'd like to add about this, maybe that you think really makes you the ideal candidate, or why someone should really give consideration to you for this position?
Well, what I would say is that, again, I've prepared myself for this opportunity. I know that there are a lot of other individuals out there that bring something to the table. I think I bring something unique in terms of all of the places that I've been, the background that I have, the experiences that I've had. I've seen every place that I've been, we've won. We may not have won right away, but we eventually won. And so I've been on ball clubs where we had very little talent. I've been on ball clubs where we had a lot of talent, and we were able to cultivate that into a winning program. And I just believe that with the experiences that I have, the preparation that I have that I would bring a unique set of skills and a diverse set of skills to the general manager's job, and they would get somebody who's focused on winning and winning the right way. So that's why I would say that I'd be a good candidate for that position.
Well, I appreciate it, Brian, and I concur with you. I think you'd be an excellent candidate, and I've really enjoyed the opportunity to spend with you today. So thank you,
Appreciate it.
And I wish you much success going forward.
All right, good seeing you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.